Okay, welcome everybody. This is the Tuesday, March 8th, 2022 meeting of the Dunn County Planning, Resource and Development Committee and Land Conservation Committee. I see I can't see my whole screen. I think everyone is present. Is that right, Mr. Carlson?
Let me stop sharing here. So yeah, it appears that everybody's present.
Okay. So we have a quorum. We'll call the meeting to order. Approval of the minutes from February 22nd. Anyone care to make a motion?
I'll move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Morehouse, thank you. Is there a second?
Supervisor Bjork seconds.
Supervisor
Or
Bjork-
Michael.
I'll take yours, Gary. Supervisor Bjork seconds. Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion minutes are approved. And again, thank you, Tracy, for doing a great job of the minutes, and we really appreciate your stepping in to be secretary. Do we have any public comments today, Tom and Krista?
No, none received.
Okay. We have no public hearing. What I would like to suggest a agenda revision, if I could. We have the landowners for 6A, the variance on the new lot, with us today and at the office, in Tom's office in Menominee. So I would, if it's without objection, allow them to not have to sit through our long meeting. I would ask that we move 8A, excuse me, up ahead of 6A and deal with that item first. Is there any objection to that? Okay, then we'll start the meeting by dealing with 8A. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So what we have is a variance request this morning. Mike and Ann Hughesby, they reside at E2642 County Road P North in Menominee, have applied for a variance request to create a new lot which does not meet the requirement of 30,000 square feet of contiguous buildable area as required by section 16.46 sub 6 of the Dunn County Land Division Ordinance. I'll move down here. So here's a sketch of the proposed area. The Hughesbys own a sizable tract of land located in the towns of Lucas and Weston. They would like to create a new lot, roughly 2 to 4 acres in size, that contains an existing home and some associated improvements. The rough area encompassed by this new lot is in blue on this attached sketch right here. A substantial portion of the proposed new lot is mapped as wetlands. So you can see this area in yellow. That is actually mapped as wetland indicators and soils, and that area also includes a 75-foot buffer. So basically the whole eastern half of the proposed new lot is classified as what we define as wetlands in our ordinance. And then another sizable portion of this new lot contains slopes that are 20% or greater. Those areas with the 20% slopes are designated in green here. So everything in between these green lines is 20% slopes. It doesn't leave a lot of land left on this new lot that would contribute towards this 30,000 square foot requirement. So anyway, the creation of this new lot will require the preparation of a certified survey map that needs to comply with all the ordinance requirements under Chapter 16. Section 16.46 sub 6 of the ordinance states, each lot must contain a net contiguous buildable area of 30,000 square feet or more without disturbing areas with slopes of 20% and greater that existed prior to concept review. So the proposed new lot in blue here does not meet that requirement. Section 16.83 of our ordinance allows for a variance request and is worded as follows, where strict application of the provisions of this chapter would impose undue hardship because of unique topographic or other conditions of the land involved, or other conditions predating adoption of this chapter, or to achieve consistency with a city or village extraterritorial ordinance, the committee may approve variances to any requirement of this chapter to the extent deemed just and proper, provided such variance shall not impair the intent and purpose of this chapter or be contrary to the Wisconsin statutes or Wisconsin administrative code. So the purpose of the contiguous buildable area standard is simply to ensure that there's adequate area for building use and sufficient area suitable for the entire on-site wastewater treatment system and also its replacement. So what we have here is a home, a septic system, both of which are existing on the property, and according to the applicant, the well and septic are in working condition. So staff from the ENS department, we've previously met with the applicant to review this variance request. In that meeting, several possible locations on the applicant's contiguous tract were reviewed for the suitability of a replacement septic system should the existing system fail. Because really that's what we're analyzing, what we're looking at here. We have an existing home, a well, a functioning septic. We're concerned where are they going to put in a replacement system somewhere on this new lot that they are creating. So the nearest practical and suitable location is west of the existing home, which is this area right here I have labeled in red, septic replacement area. There are some slopes there, as you can see, that are 20%, just over 20%. But according to our staff in the zoning office that deal with sanitation, a system can be placed on areas of slope up to 25%. So again, staff have reviewed this and we feel that a replacement system could go in this area designated in red. So the new lot, again, outlined in blue, would contain an area that we feel would be suitable for a replacement septic system. So even though the proposed new lot doesn't have 30,000 square feet of contiguous buildable area, we feel that the configuration satisfies our concerns. And again, it's mainly because we have existing improvements already there. So in other words, that 30,000 square foot requirement in our mind can be somewhat relaxed. So we have to look at variance requirements, and I'm going to highlight those for you. We have three distinct factors that we have taken into account. Let me just go back here. So number one, strict application of the provisions of this chapter would impose undue hardship because of unique topographic or other conditions of the land involved or other conditions predating the adoption of this chapter. So the subject property contains a significant amount of steep terrain in areas defined as wetlands. These unique features would require the applicant to greatly increase the size of their lot in order to achieve compliance, which would result in hardship. Additionally, the existing home and associated improvements were in existence long before the adoption of Chapter 16. Number two, the variance shall not impair the intent and purpose of Chapter 16. When we look at Section 1603 of our ordinance, that gives us all the purpose statements. There's actually 11 of them. I have them all outlined with staff responses to each one of those purposes. I don't intend this morning to go through all 11 of those. They were in your packet. If there's any questions on the purpose statements and or the staff responses to those, we can certainly go over those. But I don't intend to go through each and every one of those, but just so the committee knows we did consider all those. And then the third item is the variance shall not be contrary to the Wisconsin statutes or Wisconsin administrative code. And certainly if we do grant it, or the committee does grant a variance this morning, it would not be contrary to state statute or Wisconsin administrative code. So based on the above analysis and variance requirements, ENS department is recommending approval of the Hughesby's variance request. The creation of a proposed new lot to include the existing home and associated improvements is consistent, we feel, with the purpose and intent of Chapter 16. Before I conclude my report, I would like to draw your attention briefly to a few key items listed within the variance section of our land division ordinance, and I'll just go through these. So the committee shall not grant variances unless it makes findings based on evidence that the three things are being met. The granting of a variance will not be detrimental to the public safety, health, or welfare, or injurious to other properties. The conditions upon which the request is based are unique to the property for which the variance is sought and are not applicable generally to other property. And lastly, because of the particular physical surrounding shape or topographical conditions of the specific property involved, a particular undue hardship to the owner would result as distinguished from a mere inconvenience. Undue hardship shall relate solely to the physical characteristics of the property. Financial hardship, loss of profit, self-imposed hardships such as that resulting from unfamiliarity with regulations, deed restrictions, proceeding without required permits or illegal sales are not sufficient reasons for the granting of a variance. No variance shall be granted under this section that would modify or waive requirements of any other county ordinance. And lastly, something to keep in mind, a majority vote of the entire membership of the committee shall be required to grant a variance of any standard within this chapter, and the reasons therefore shall be entered in the committee minutes. That concludes my report this morning. I do have the applicants, Mr. and Mrs. Hughesby, with me in my office, and if the committee would like to hear from them, they are more than willing to explain their plans for the property and answer any questions the committee may have. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Tom.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Yes, let's let the Hughesby speak for a minute. And
okay, I'm going to trade places here with Mike. Want to just have a seat in my chair.
Good morning.
Morning. Go ahead.
What do you want to know?
Well, why don't you first, I guess, your name and address first, and then just say anything you think is important for the committee to know as to why you need this variance and deserve this variance.
Well, my son has lived in this house for a number of years. It's willed to him, but he would like to get something. He wants to make some more improvements and things like that. He would like to get it into his name.
Mhm.
And basically that's what it's all about.
How long have you owned the property?
What was that?
How long have you owned the property?
My dad bought it in 1951 and I took it over in 1961.
Okay. Does anyone on the committee have any questions for Mr. Hughesby?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Dan.
the septic system, the citing of a potential septic system, has that been done only in case the existing septic fails, or is a new septic system going in assuming that the variance was granted?
It's in case it does fail. It is working fine at this point. But
Okay. And I don't know, Ann or Tom, was the septic system inspected?
no.
No. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Gary.
this doesn't really pertain to this particular situation, but is a variance ever granted with some restrictions? Say like the footprint can't be like enlarged, or is that ever done, Mr. Carlson?
I'm not aware, Supervisor Bjork, of placing a restriction on a variance. I don't know the legality of that. So I guess maybe what you're asking is if we allow this variance, or if the committee approves a variance and they create a new certified survey map, and then say 5 years down the road, they want to double the size of the house. Is that your question?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think, well, if no restriction is placed on this variance, then certainly they could put more buildings on the property. They can do whatever with it. It's its own parcel. I don't know. I guess personally, I don't think it would be my recommendation would be not to place any restrictions. I mean, they're asking for a variance to waive one item, the 30,000 square feet. And personally, I don't think it would be a good policy to place a restriction on the property in conjunction with the variance, but I haven't given it much thought, 10, 15 seconds here, but my gut says it wouldn't be a good idea.
Okay, thank you. I'm just kind of curious about that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gary. Are any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Huseby. We'll appreciate your coming in for the discussion. Any committee discussion about the motion? Tom, does our motion, if it's a positive motion, does it need to specify the items that you mentioned in the ordinance, the three or four points with regard to why the variance is granted?
Let me just go back here. I don't know that it typically, I don't think it does. I brought this up just so the committee is aware that your decision should be based on these items. I don't think the motion would need to specifically call all these out. The motion would just simply be,
Okay,
granting of a variance of section 16.46 sub 6 requiring the third, basically waiving the 30,000 square foot requirement. Contiguous buildable area requirement.
so if the committee could look at these points, and if there are any, is there anything in this motion that in your view anything in this section that would be problematic with regard to providing this variance, just for a minute? Hearing no concerns, let's assume that we as a committee feel like this variant, if we make this variance, it would not contradict any of these. It would address all of these items. With that, then, any discussion of the committee?
The only question I'd have, Mr. Chair, is it said that it'd be between 2 and 4 acres, but could it include that the new septic replacement area be part of that for sure?
That looks like it is.
But that is, how big is that right now? Because it said on the application between 2 and 4. So how big is that proposed new lot as it stands right now?
And I can answer that. So when the application, we were working out the application, we weren't 100% sure on the boundary at that time. We knew it was going to be around 3, so I suggested leave it open-ended, 2 to 4 acres. That way you're not boxed in. After we came up with it, this boundary that you see in blue is about 3.2 acres. So it falls almost right in the middle of that range. And I guess, this is the sketch that the applicant has presented. Let me just go down here, but there is an application that was received. And so here's the application that was filled out, signed and dated. They paid their $200 fee. And in part of the application is they have to attach a sketch, which is this. So if the committee approves this request today, it needs to substantially conform, with this blue line, more or less. It may turn out to be 3.5, it may turn out to be 2.9, but at the end of the day, it's going to look, the new lot had better look very similar in nature to this blue outline. When it comes in for my review, if it doesn't, then, we're going to have a problem. So does that answer your question? The request would be, or the approval of the variance request would be directly tied to this sketch within reason. Obviously, if a line moves a few feet here or there, I don't consider that a substantial change. But if they square this up, the new map comes in and doesn't include the septic replacement area. Well, now that is not what the committee approved. So we are, it is somewhat, we're going to hold them to this sketch more or less. And that's why the sketch is very important and why we met with them to make sure that this area that we feel is suitable for a replacement septic is going to be included in the new lot. Because when the Husebys originally came in, this dogleg, if you will, was not on their sketch. And that's when we put the brakes on and said, whoa, wait a minute. The only area is right in here where my cursor's moving around. And this area has a lot of compacted soil. Talking with zoning staff, it's highly unlikely a new septic or replacement would be allowed in this area. Furthermore, the well is located right here near the southwest corner of the home, or on the west side of the home, and getting proper separation wouldn't be possible. So again, staff feel this configuration will satisfy our concerns and will include an area for the septic replacement system.
Because I thought Tom here like a while back, if he came up with a proposal so they could bring it in without spending a lot of money on a certified survey map and before things go ahead. So at least they get an idea that yes, is it okay? You know, and like you said, it looks like it should be okay, but sometimes maybe give the proposal, yeah, that looks good, and then come back with a certified survey map and then approve it.
Well, we're trying to keep the applicant from incurring a large expense on a survey for something that may get shot down. You know, obviously they don't want to hire a surveyor and spend, I'm going to just throw some numbers out, $1,000 to $2,000 for a survey done that the committee may not be happy with. So,
but that's why, Tom, that on a proposal, they come in and then the committee say, yeah, that looks like it'd be okay. Then should the next step be come in with a certified survey map and then like officially, like, you know, say it's okay. You know, if you said it's the way it looks, and that's the way it comes back in, then there should be no problem. But
well, and there is nothing in the ordinance saying the committee can't review a certified survey map. So if the committee would like this, when the certified survey map comes in and would like final approval of it, we certainly can do that. And I suppose you could make that a condition today. If you're going to impose a condition on the variance, perhaps you could grant the variance with the condition that the final certified survey map will come before the committee for final approval to ensure conformance, you know, with this sketch. That's certainly within your purview, I believe.
I don't see no problem at all. I just thought that the process should be come in with proposal and then staff or the committee would give their blessings or say, no, I don't think that would work. Then they're not spending the money on the certified survey map. But if it does look, everything looks perfect, then you get it all official. And then there's no question if it's off a little bit or, you know, whatever. So that's my only concern. Thank you.
You're welcome. And just to respond, I guess that's why we're here today, is just to, you know, very little time and effort has been spent on this, other than, you know, staff did meet with the applicant. And I guess that's part of the $200 fee that they have paid. That allowed us staff time to review this, put this sketch together. And if the committee does grant this, then at that point, the applicants can move forward with a larger financial investment, which would be the certified survey map. So.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
may I speak, please?
Yes.
I can understand Gary's concern somewhat, but I think that's Tom or staff's job to look over certified survey maps. We don't look at them anyway as a committee unless they come across a subdivision or something. I think Tom can cover it without having the applicant come back, and I feel it accomplished the same thing that Supervisor Bjork is talking about.
Thanks, Mike. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Would anyone care to make a motion? I guess
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of this.
So Supervisor Anderson has moved approval of the variance request to create a new lot in the town of Weston, and with the understanding that the committee, should I add this, Jim, with the understanding the committee, well, let's just take your motion as it is. That's fine. Is that sufficient, Tom?
Well, I think it should be worded exactly that, similar to what is on the agenda. Create a new lot in the town of Weston that does not meet the contiguous buildable area requirement.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom. That's the way my motion will read.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Do we have a second to that motion?
I will second it.
Mr. Kinnear, seconds. Any further discussion?
Yes, I just thought of one question, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Is Weston a zone township?
I can answer that, yes, and it is, the current property is zoned general ag.
Okay, so that would prohibit it from being split up anyway. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, then let's take a vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. I note that we had a unanimous vote, so we passed the majority threshold, and the motion is approved. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Huseby, for coming in. We really appreciate your sharing your experience with us.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, let's move on to the staff reports. Register of Deeds monthly report. And I would note that I think Heather is gone at a conference today, so will not be joining us, but we can go through her report. Anyone have any comments or questions they want to raise at this time? Okay, let's move on then to Survey Division. Mr. Carlson. Any questions anyone has on this report? Okay, let's move on.
One question real quick. I'm sorry.
That's right.
I noticed Mr. Carlson said I'm spending a fair amount of my time explaining the new ordinance to both private surveyors, members of the public. Tom, would you like to expound on that at all?
Sure, I can. Obviously, with anything new, there's a learning curve. Some people have read the ordinance, and even after reading it have questions. Others, I'm convinced, haven't read the ordinance and are trying to get me to explain it, which I guess that's my job, but I feel like people really need really need to read the ordinance, and then if they have questions, call me. Don't call me and say, what do I need to know? What do I need to be concerned about here? That's your job. And it just seems like I've been getting more phone calls from private individuals looking to divide their property, and perhaps they've read the ordinance, or perhaps they've contacted a surveyor and they just feel like they need to get some questions answered. So yes, I am spending more time on the phone, by email, answering questions, putting sketches together. And I'll be honest, land divisions going forward are not going to be as simple as they were in the past. There's a lot more things we're looking at now, a lot more limiting factors, such as, the two big ones are the wetlands, the hydric soils, and then of course the steep slopes. And when I look at the steep slopes and the wetland areas of the county, those two features take up, in my mind, over half of the county is impacted by those two features. So we really have to be careful advising people on what they can and can't do. In the past, it was a matter of how much land do you have, what is it zoned, how big of a piece are you creating, does it have road frontage, you're good to go. Now it's a little more involved. We have to look at more factors, and of course that results in more administrative time. So so far I've been adjusting to it, but it is our slower time of the year, and I'm I guess a little concerned when things ramp up here in the next few months, certainly the summer months, how much more time this is going to take up. But I thought it was noteworthy, and I included it in my report.
Thanks, Tom. Any other questions? Okay. Planning and zoning. Any questions of Ann? Comments? I noticed, Dan, that you had a Board of Adjustment hearing this month. How did that go?
Well, there were two things on there. The first one was a pretty cut and dry. The second one was actually an appeal to a determination that I had made regarding Copper Creek, the barn at Copper Creek, the wedding venue. Ultimately, the board affirmed my decision, but this was the first time any of us had really seen an appeal, so it was a little different.
Okay. All right, thanks. Any questions of Ann? All right, let's move on. Land conservation. Any questions of Chase?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman, of Chase.
Sure.
There was a student from Colfax that was going to be in that contest in March. Has that happened yet, Chase?
Yes, the poster contest and speaking contest was held last week as part of the state conference for Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation Association. Unfortunately, our student from Colfax did not place in that contest, but they were the first place poster, conservation poster for the county and the West Central region. So they should be commended for that.
Yes, thank you, Chase. Maybe there's some way we could exhibit that poster at some event. I don't know what it would be, but I think people ought to see it to congratulate that student. Thank you, Chase.
Certainly, yep.
Any
Mr.
other
Chair, I
questions?
also, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Chase.
I was going to make a couple extra comments here regarding my report that I didn't make it into the report. Wanted to mention that this coming Thursday, which would have been the normal scheduled day for the Red Cedar Watershed Conference, that had been canceled due to COVID-19 situation. But one of the keynote speakers was Rick Clark, was scheduled to attend that conference. Fortunately, he is still coming to the area and will be in Baldwin coming up here on Thursday as part of a farmer-led watershed groups getting together and sponsoring, in addition to some other sponsors, to have him come. So he is a soil health farmer from Indiana. He's spoken around the country and many times in Wisconsin, but it'll be good to have him here in our area. So if you want to spread the word or have questions about that, you can contact our office and we can get you the information. It's limited seating, so the invite is focused for the farming community primarily, but certainly if you have constituents that are interested, they can reach out to us. So, and then the last thing I wanted to mention is actually tomorrow I was asked to present on my experiences regarding nitrates and groundwater, both my experiences here in Dunn County and my previous experience in Pepin County, to present as part of a EPA regional workshop, particularly on nitrate reduction solutions in groundwater. So I wanted to give you a heads up on that it's a special invite, and I've been asked to speak on behalf of my experiences and Land and Water Conservation Department's role in that effort across the state. So that will be tomorrow. And then if you have any other questions about the particular report, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I've invited Tina Barone from our office to speak on for a few minutes on her work, specifically the Snowmobile Trail program, of which you'll have, there's a resolution coming up later on the agenda that we'll ask you to act on. So if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we can move on with Tina.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, let's have Tina come on.
Just going to share my screen here quick. All right. So I'm here to talk to you about the Snowmobile Trail Aids program. It is a DNR program, and the program basically takes funds from snowmobilers, what they've paid in for registrations for trail passes and some from gas tax. It's a reimbursement program. So the Snowmobile club members enter in their work, and then we, as their sponsor, because it has to be sponsored by a government entity, we basically apply for grants, payments, reimbursements, and then we are required to maintain a trail map. We've been in this role for the club since 2010, when the program really started to have to be sponsored by a government entity. There are two different types of grants as part of this program. There's the maintenance grant, which is that reimbursement for the club members' volunteer labor and equipment time for maintaining the trails. And then there's a separate grant program for bridges, trail rehab projects, things like that. There are about 300 funded miles of trail that are groomed by Dunn County clubs in this county. All of the trails are now funded. That's changed over the last few years because we got a few additional trails funded. These trails are constantly changing, and I do have to maintain the trail map, keeping in mind what is road route, because that's not eligible. What the trail names are, what the mileage is, things like that. This program has continually gotten harder as time's gone on. There's more hoops to jump through, but we as a county have made some changes, and those changes have had a better environmental impact on the program, as well as it's reduced our county time spent on it. For the maintenance program, basically we have to submit an annual grant application and have to send in the trail data to DNR to verify the miles. And then club members have to log and enter the maintenance that they do, the type of equipment they used, how many hours they spend, into a computer program called SNARS. And then Janelle receives those entries, 600 to 800 per year approximately, and she has to review those and approve those prior to them being considered eligible expenses. Then Janelle will pay the clubs, and after that, she'll seek reimbursement from the DNR to pay for what we've paid the clubs. The trail rehab part is kind of a total different thing. It requires that I meet with club members, look for wetland areas, assess what type of water we're crossing, are there floodplains in the area, and is the project in general even feasible? Then basically, if we think it is, I'll submit a grant application that includes a budget. How much are those permits going to cost? You have to do a study to study the floodplain, things like that. If the application is approved, then we look at bidding out the project. So an IFB goes through finance for this. And then, once we select that winning bidder of the bridge company, I work with them to apply for permits and schedule install. This is one of the parts that's changed recently. We used to do all the permits ourselves, but now I'm assisting the companies to do it themselves. So hopefully in the future, this will require less of our time. And then basically I make sure they installed it correctly. We get an invoice, we get certification that they've installed it correctly. Janelle pays the bridge company and then seeks reimbursement from the DNR for that amount. These bridges are considered Dunn County property because we hold the grant. So they are considered capital assets and we do have to insure them. This is a picture of a bridge that had some issues and was replaced last year. The lower right-hand corner shows the new bridge that was installed. Things that we have to consider, I kind of touched on this before, but plains, wetlands, shoreline zoning permit, DNR clear span bridge permit, historic or archaeological sites, threatened and endangered species. Not all of these apply on every site, but it's something that has to be considered. Last year, we put in 5 bridges with approximately $2,000 of grant funds. And last year, we applied for 3 new bridge grant applications, and hopefully those will be installed this year. Here are 2 other bridge sites that had bridges installed last year. In addition to the grant funded things, I have to provide support as well to club members. they're looking at rerouting a trail or moving a bridge that they own. So making sure that all the proper permits are gotten, they're considering the environmental impact. You might wonder, how does snowmobile program fit into our land conservation goals? And, you know, I do get some education time about permits, about floodplain, about wetland, directly relating to snowmobiles. But also I sometimes get the opportunity to talk conservation practices. Sometimes I get to talk about land and water conservation, what we do. On the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see some pictures of a wetland restoration. And that project actually was possible because of a relationship I built with a club member who was then willing to say, hey, we could try this. And it ended up being a really nice project. Another thing that's not really on our land conservation goals, but that is a benefit to this program, is economic development. So you might wonder, what else do I do? Well, I work with agronomic and engineering practices. This year I've got about 10 engineering practices to construct. I work on the planning, the design, the construction, certifying that the engineering was completed properly. We have a really unique system that we can work under. We don't have to be professional engineers, but we work under the professional engineering license of the DADCAP professional engineer. We have to kind of prove that we know what we're doing in order to sign off on projects, but that is a special thing that we get that people in the private industry can't do. Also, just scheduling inspections, developing options for compliance, looking at funding options, because compliance is not cheap in most cases. And then just in general, providing resources and doing contracts. I just wanted to show you a few pictures of the engineering work I've worked on. On the upper left-hand side, you'll see a concentrated flow channel. It's eroding. This is in a pasture. And so I came up with the idea of putting the water through a pipe to keep it clean and keep it from eroding. And then we built an embankment on top of that pipe, and we contained the animals to the top of the embankment with fencing, and we stabilized that top with an animal trail. This is working really well for the landowner. It doesn't have problems with erosion. It's reduced the amount of sediment and nutrients going downstream. Then on the upper right-hand corner, you can see a picture of a really idle manure pit. This has probably sat here for 20 years. It's also in the water table. So we went in here, we pumped out the liquids, we dug out the solids, and then we removed the contaminated soil, filled it in with clean material, sloped it off, and seeded it down. Now all the water is shedding off of this area. The pond that you see is actually in the horse pasture next door, but it addressed the resource concern there. Then this is just showing some of the insides of a grade stabilization or dam design. I'm getting ready to to check the pipe grade and make sure that's appropriate. The top shows one of many pages of an engineering design. Generally, there are a minimum of 12 pages, and then they include specifications that specify other things like what pipe is acceptable, how to compact the soil, things like that. If you're interested in seeing one of the designs, I'm happy to show you one if you want to come into the office. Then I also work on agronomic practices, encouraging the use of cover crops, no-till, nutrient management plans, converting over to rotational grazing, and then evaluating crop rotations for erosion. I just wanted to close showing you some not very pretty sites, but just to help you understand that a lot of the sites we deal with are not pretty and they need a lot of work. There's a lot of outside the box thinking that's required. And it takes time. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of money. So we are working on it, but sometimes it takes a little bit. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. I just wanted to commend Tina and her work, and she carries a large workload here within our Land and Water Conservation Division. There's many frustrations on the multiple hats that all of our staff wear and trying to balance workload and time to make sure we're doing quality work as well as meeting the needs of all of you as well as the general public. And I think it was important to not only describe and discuss the snowmobile trail program, because that is a time-consuming effort, seems to be throughout the year, but also that's just one of the hats that Tina particularly wears, and the bulk of her other work, and maybe more priority you might think of the other work is just as important as she described in some of those practices and the pictures there at the end. So thank you, Tina. And I guess I would open it up to the committee if you have any questions for Tina or I regarding the snowmobile trail program or some of the other work.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Diane, please, first.
No questions, but thank you, both of you, particularly to Tina for sharing this. It was really enlightening and well done. And I think maybe at least I understand a little bit more of some of the challenges the staff deals with on a probably daily basis. So we appreciate it. Thank you.
Supervisor Anderson, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I certainly agree, Tina. This is very impressive. I am not a snowmobiler and I'm not a biker, but I certainly am interested in all the excellent work you're doing. So this was great. I do have a question, maybe and asking you how we can help. I'm chairman of the CR&T, so is Chairman Quinn on that committee. And one of the things of the T is rural tourism. So my question, Tina and Chase, is there a way that we might be able to help make awareness to the public in our new webpage that we will be setting up in Dunn County, that people can become aware better, snowmobile during the winter and biking trails during the summer, that people can, we can have pictures on this webpage of all these great trails and where they go. Maybe it's on there now, but we're going to have a new webpage. Maybe Chairman Quinn wants to add something to this because he's on the committee as well. But if we can help in that way, that would be, I would love it. Comment? Thank you.
I can let Tina chime in too if she'd like. I think you know, the main work involved with the snowmobile trail program is working with the Dunn County Snowmobile Association and working with those club members to identify what their needs are. And because the grant program through the state, which brings snowmobile registration fees back through the system, it must come through the county. So the bulk of our work is really in response to what those clubs need. So if they need a trail move, they need a new bridge, and making sure that they meet all those requirements. So, you know, as far as promotion of the trail system, we've kind of relied on the snowmobile clubs for that. We've helped them with map making in not only our office, but also our land information office. So certainly, depending on the platform that is intended to be used for distribution of promotional materials for tourism, we can assist in providing what resources we have available. Again, our time is limited, but we can certainly assist in providing location for maps and other grant related program stuff. So that way the users of those trail systems understand how those trails are funded and how they're maintained.
Yep, thank you, Chase. I'll follow up on that with the Snowmobile Association. Appreciate it.
Jim, the only other thing I would add would be that we have had requests for the data for the snowmobile trails, and we have released that as public records information, but we have released it not in a map form, but as the data itself, because we don't want to reduce the Snowmobile Association's funds that they raise by selling maps. So I would encourage you to talk to the association and make sure they have a comfort level with that, because it is good promotion, but they also make money from selling maps.
Okay.
Thank you, Tina.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Bartlett.
I'm familiar with the snowmobile program. I was chairman of the Ridgeland Prairie Farm Club for many years and associated with the association. I think it would be good if we could let the Snowmobile Association know how much Dunn County contributes to their work. Sometimes I've heard that the county, that some people don't think the county does enough. And I know that we do get some administrative costs for some of the work that we do when we do this, but I also know there's a lot of extra time that we don't get administrative costs. And if we were to look at like last year with some bridges and all the work that Tina just told us she did, it would be interesting to know how much Dunn County participated and helped out the Snowmobile Association. And I don't want to give you a lot of extra work, but I think a lot of those records you have, it's just to pull the numbers together and let us know what that dollar amount would be worth.
Chairman Bartlett, I have some answers, maybe not to the full detail, but I could pull that together. Basically, in review of our time since I've been here, so basically all of 2021, we spent around 500 hours on the Snowmobile Trail program. And that includes everything that Janelle does as far as reimbursements and approval of trail maintenance submittals, all of Tina's work that she puts into the bridge program and the additional requirements that has brought, and then my time in reviewing some of those things, processing some of the bid documents and assisting where my staff are needed. So, we've Tina and I met with the Snowmobile Association here this winter, talked to them about some of the work that we're doing and how we can help streamline, or they can help streamline some of our processes. So Tina alluded to that in her presentation here of trying to lean on the clubs a little bit more for some of that work to help us get through some of those, get through some of our time challenges to make sure we can still provide a quality service yet, make sure our other priorities are met too. So I could certainly put a dollar figure to the hours, but it's around 500 hours. And I see that continuing probably for another year or two until we kind of get things even more streamlined. In addition to that 500 hours and the dollars associated with that staff time, there's certainly just the grant dollars alone. Most of these bridges are, around that 50 to 60, maybe even more thousands of dollars. So there is a significant funnel of funds that come through the county back to the clubs. So thanks for your questions.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know what that $500 would be worth in dollars.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Gary.
I have a question for, Tina. When you put a bridge in that's paid for by the state, is there any kind of easement that is put on the private landowner's land?
There is not an easement. However, to apply for the grant, we have to have the landowner sign an agreement. It is just an agreement. It is not recorded with the deed, but it allows the use of that trail system for a specified amount of time. They get to specify, and then they can review it after so many years. The agreement does specify that if they no longer allow the use of the snowmobiles for the trail, that we, Dunn County, can remove that bridge and move it to a different site, that they as a landowner understand Dunn County owns it, they do not.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Anything else? It's a good discussion. And I do have one question I should know the answer to, and I don't, but I'm wondering if either Chase or Tina can explain the connection, if any, between the snowmobile program and the ATV program, how they're interconnected and any role that the county might have in the ATV program?
I can start by answering that. Tina can welcome your input as well. So right now, the ATV program, we have very little involvement on, other than many of the members involved with ATVs are snowmobile club members as well. So there's some interaction there, but ATVs are primarily routes right now. They're not trails. They're not part of a trail system. They're routes on public roads. So we would not really have any involvement in that. We have discussed it as to what that looks like in the future if trails were to be developed and what our role would be. And I think we would have to have a long conversation with all of you about our priorities within our department, as well as the time and staff capacity we have to tackle that sort of thing. We're already, like I mentioned, spending 500 hours of staff time to do that program. And I would estimate that a snowmobile or excuse me, an ATV program would for sure double, if not triple that time. So we'll have to evaluate that if that time was to be, or that request was to be approached in the future. Tina, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, in a lot of counties, ATVs and snowmobiles can use the same trails. The trails are dedicated trails in county forests, things like that. Dunn County, our snowmobile trails are almost entirely through cropland, and those aren't going to be open except during the winter. So it makes a lot bigger challenge for an ATV program in Dunn County. So it's kind of, it makes sense in a lot of other places, but in Dunn County, not so much. I know they had been trying to develop different ATV trails in different areas. And it's been kind of a hard process to even find trails that they can consistently use. If ATVs and snowmobiles are using the same trail system, the snowmobile clubs actually would get less money per mile than they do now, because they'd be basically splitting that trail payment for the maintenance. So there's some challenges with it.
That's helpful. Thank you very much.
Chairman Quinn, if I could, I do have an answer for Chairman Bartlett's question on the dollar amounts. I do have those figured out, so it just took me a minute to pull it up. But 2021, we were around $28,000 in staff time for the program. And that's based on my rate of pay, Tina's rate of pay, and Janelle's rate of pay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, great.
And it's Mike here again.
Yeah, Mike.
Chase, we have some administrative costs covered, but not nearly that much, I take it?
Correct. We do submit for reimbursement. We will again this year for some of our administrative time, but it's maybe 10% of that. So.
Thank you. 10%. Okay.
Okay, anything else from anyone?
I would just say it's not that we're not trying to reimburse or seek reimbursement for more staff time. It's just we are limited on what we actually get.
Yeah, I understand that, Chase. I was just chuckling at the amount of time you put in that is unreimbursed.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, thanks for the Tina and Chase for the report. We'll move on then to in the agenda to the proposed Tainter Lake Rehabilitation District information presentation. Chase, you want to introduce us to this?
I will, thank you. So staff here in our office have been approached by a local community group that I'll introduce a couple of gentlemen here shortly regarding a proposed Tainter Lake Rehabilitation District. So I'll let the individuals go into the details, but basically we at the county have a role to play in this process. Lake District formation is an entity of government, so to speak, and there are statutes that describe how a lake district is to be formed and how it's to be administered and implemented. Those state statutes are chapter 33. So the county, and specifically the county board, will have a role to play in the adoption or approval of a lake district. This is typically done through a petition process, but we as staff in the Land and Water Conservation Division have been turned to for this type of work because it is consistent with most other lake district formation in the state of Wisconsin, and particularly the land conservation committees tend to be involved more than any other committee at a county level. So it's logical, given the type of reason for forming a lake district, typically as natural resources and surface water related, that the Land Conservation Committee and the associated department would be involved. I would also mention that our Land Information Office, Steve Kochaver and Rachel Wells, have been involved in this process to this point as well, as you can see with a map that's been developed here. But I will introduce Pete Heimdahl and Tom Bills right now to give a presentation on their group, the reasons for the lake district, proposed lake district formation, and then their process for how they've gotten to this point so far. So if you'd like, Chair, I'll introduce Pete Heimdahl here and Tom Bills and let them explain that.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us. My name is Tom Bills, and about 10 years ago, I, along with my partner here today, helped establish the Friends of the Red Cedar Basin. We worked hard, learned a lot, but didn't accomplish what we wanted, mainly due to the fact we founded a non-profit lake organization rather than a lake district. Knowing what we know now, we understand that groups like ours really aren't looked at as a legitimate organization. This is the reason we're here today to discuss the need for a lake district. A lake district is a unit of government designed to manage a lake. A lake district is guided, operated, and elected by those property owners inside the boundary of the lake district. A lake district can be funded by grants, tax-exempt fundraising, and by direct fees or tax levy if the members approve. A lake district is a democracy with financial and project direction controlled by the property owners in the lake district. As you can see by the map provided, our lake district begins on the south border at the Cedar Falls Dam and ends just past the Russian Slough on the Red Cedar River and near Peninsula Park on the Hay River. Only riparian properties are included in our lake district. The Friends of the Red Cedar Basin have spent the last several months working to develop these boundaries, create a petition showing need, and a petition for the Lake District membership to view and sign. These documents have been included in your packet. Here to further explain the petition process is Pete Heimdahl. Thank you for having me.
We are processing the Lake District through under the auspices of Chapter 33 of the Wisconsin state statutes. They have specific requirements of what we must do. We have chosen to use a petition process. There are several different ways of doing this, but we are going to petition all the members of the lake. In order to accomplish this, we must present to the county a petition, page one of which, let's see, can we back up one? There we go. Page one of which looks like this. What it does is, first, the requirement is to state the name, proposed name of the district, and we have chosen the Tainter Lake Rehabilitation District, which is not unusual. And that's listed in paragraph 1. The necessity for the district is also to be noted in this page 1 of the petition. Anyone who lives anywhere near Lake Tainter knows how desperate we are to help this lake because of the algae and the sedimentation coming in from the Red Cedar and the Hay Rivers. So those ideas are filled out in paragraph 2. As we scroll down, you can see that we must select, before we do the petitions, specific boundaries, and we have done that. They're shown in a rough manner on the map that you saw. Here is a relatively, in paragraph 5, is a relatively informal description, as Tom went through a little bit ago. And in the when the petition is presented, that map will be Exhibit 1. But a more precise and I think legally sufficient description of the boundary is a list of PIN numbers. I think we can scroll down here to Exhibit 2. There we are. There are about 730 properties in around Lake Tainter. We were able to fit all the list of pins on 2 pages, so we can print this back and front and back, and that is our Lake District in a nutshell, right there, or our proposed Lake District. Now, if we back up to page 2, right there. When we present this to the county, we will present a page 1, and we will present several page 2s. Page 2s are the signature pages, and the way we've organized them is that by individual owner, usually a husband and wife team. As you can see on this is my property. I'm listed on it, and a place for my signature and the date that I signed. And my wife is on there too. And we only own 1 parcel on the lake, and that is listed. Now, there are a few cases where there are multiple owners. I think we've got one where there are 5. They would all be listed on the petition, and a signature would be required from each person on the tax roll. There are some people who own several properties. There we go, right there. Let's keep it to several properties, and under the parcel ID number at the top, every parcel ID number would be listed. However, no matter how many properties a person owns or parcels along the lake, they're only entitled to 1 vote. Now, as I said, there are over 700 properties around the lake, and there are an awful lot of owners. We've organized, as you can see from the map, if we can zip back to that thing again, there we are. I just wanted to see the different colors ringing the boundary around there. There's a legend that we've organized into 29 different neighborhoods around the lake. Starting with town of Menominee on the southwestern corner, through 25 different neighborhoods in Tainter Township, 2 in Sherman, and 1 in Red Cedar. Now, we have we have organized the signature pages into those 29 neighborhoods. We have a notebook, and I think you can see it, the pile of them. Here's Tom's got one. I don't know, can you see Tom on there?
Yep.
Every neighborhood has its own notebook. You can open it up, Tom, you can see all the page twos for that particular neighborhood, about 25 in that neighborhood are in there. Now here's after we got that organized, we ended up with 598 page twos. Most bearing a place for two signatures, a husband and wife. There are a total of 932 property owners in our books. And we must, in order to be successful, we must have 51% of those property owners sign the petitions. Our goal is about 65%. So we're going to have to look for 600 signatures. Here's how we're going to go about doing that. And I don't think we've got a slide for that, so if you just bear with me here, I can explain it. When we eventually have all of our signatures, we will put them in a packet. All the page twos with all the signatures we've gathered, a page one, exhibit one, which is the map, and exhibit two, which is the list of pins. That will be presented to the county for consideration. Now, our big job is to get those signatures. And we're in the process of, we'll very shortly be in that process. We have 5 petition signing events scheduled at 3 different locations. What we're going to do is to make a packet, just the same as the county would receive. Every landowner will get a packet of the petition, less page 2. We keep page 2's signature page, and we'll get the signatures as we go through our process. But they will have all the information that you have. Plus a brochure, a 2-page brochure, which we will include in the packet. Those will be put into plastic bags, and around the 21st of March, depending upon the weather forecast, we'll go around to every property and hang it on the flag of the mailbox. So everybody should have access to the information the county is eventually going to get, other than their own specific signature page. Now, at the same time, we have 2 posters. One is the map, and the other one is a poster which advertises the petition signing events. Will be placed at Jake's and at the Pioneer and at the Elk Point Resort. Those should go up this week. So people should have a lot of information as to where they ought to go in order to sign the petitions. On the 26th of March, we will be, that's a Saturday, we will be at the Tainter Town Hall from 2 o'clock until 4 o'clock for an information center, and coincidentally, petition signing if the people who attend would like to sign a petition. We'll have a question and answer and discussions as to what we're all about. Then on 2 successive weekends, we will be at Jake's on a Saturday and a Sunday, 2nd and 3rd of April, from noon until 6 o'clock, with all of our documents ready for people to walk in and sign. The following weekend, we will be at Elk Point Resort, Saturday and Sunday, April 9th and 10th, doing the same thing. Now, if we're lucky, we'll get our 65% signatures in those 3 events. If we're not, we have 29 volunteers who have signed up to be neighborhood coordinators. And after the fact, after the events are completed, we'll take their packet of petition pages around and knock door to door and see if we can reach our goal. That's how we're going to go about it. And hopefully by the end of April, beginning of May, we should be able to present to the county clerk a whole packet of signed petitions. And that's what we're up to. And we thought it would be a good idea to give you an idea what we're all about. Question?
Thank you, gentlemen. Any questions for either Tom or Pete from the committee?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Tom, could you go back to the maps? Okay, like right there. So just the riparian people that own land on a lake will be part of that district? And then the other question is, what is the red line? Because I see the red line there. Inside that red line towards the lake, there's a lot of farmland. Is that going to be included in the district?
Only if it touches the lake.
Only if it touches the lake. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, if you could scroll up north on this thing, you notice the large areas there around the Hay River, and then over to the right around the Red Cedar. There are some very large parcels there. A lot of state-owned, county-owned, and whatever. But those parcels just happen to touch the lake, and if they do, they're in the Lake District. Now, it's a very delicate process choosing the boundary. The state recommends that the guidance from the state is any property that benefits from a lake district should be considered for inclusion. And they specifically mention riparian properties, which are those which border on the lake. So we chose to include only riparian properties. Those people may think that it might be a little unfair that they would be the only ones involved in resuscitating our lake, but they're the ones that are most benefit by the establishment of the Lake District.
So then what was the reason for that big red line that kind of outlines the whole district?
Those are roads.
I know the roads, but okay, was that just the idea? Okay.
Yeah, it's B and DG and D and whatever.
As
Yeah.
Supervisor Bjork, just the way the state roads are in blue, county roads are in red, town roads are in purple. So it's just a coloring of the map. So it doesn't indicate any type of boundary or anything.
Well, thank you, because I got a property that touches that red line on Highway B, but as long as that's not part of the district, then I have no concerns. And thank you for answering my question.
Well, if you'd like to volunteer your property to be included, we'd be glad to accept it.
That might not happen.
Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't think so.
Any other questions for the committee?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mike.
I'm just wondering, you said that the county has a role. Two questions. What exactly is the county's role, approval or disapproval or what? And do the townships have a role? So two questions. What's the county's role and do the townships have a role?
Okay, yeah, and I should have completed the discussion on that. Once we present this to the county clerk, there will be a validation or verification process that the people that signed it actually own that property and that the signatures are correct. We're not sure. It's up to the county how that is done. Within 30 days of receiving this, though, the county must hold a hearing, an open hearing, where people can come in and comment one way or another. Then within a 6-month period, the county must come to a conclusion and either approve or disapprove the formation of a lake district. So it's a fairly long process. There is an excellent guide that was produced by UW Extension in Stevens Point in conjunction with DNR on how to form and operate a lake district. We've been following that very, very closely as our Bible. It also goes into detail on what the responsibilities of the county would be once we present our petition to the county clerk.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Diane.
Mr. Heimdall, you started mentioned the question that I have. How does the Lake District actually, assuming all the permissions are granted and the Lake District is formed, how does it operate? It's a kind of quasi-governmental agency, is it not?
Yes. It is, once it is formed, there will be by statute, there's a 5-member commission, board of commissioners. One of the commissioners will be appointed by the county board. One of the commissioners will be appointed by the majority township, which happens to be Taylor Township. They overwhelm this. And the other 3 will be elected by the landowners, who are all members of the Lake District at large in the annual meeting. Now, what happens is every year there'll be an annual meeting somewhere in summer, early fall, in which projects for the following year are presented. The budget for the following year is presented, and all the property owners are invited to that annual meeting and may vote up or down on those projects, and they then determine what their tax rate is going to be for the following year. And it'll vary depending upon what the projects are. It could be 0 if they just don't want to do anything at all. But it'll be run by this 5-person commission. We are, when we present this, we're discussing suggesting a 7-member commission, 1 from the county, 1 from Taylor Lake, and 5. And we would hope all 7, or how many there are, would come from the Lake District, be landowners within the district, including the ones appointed by the county and by town of Taylor. We would like to see a 7-member board, and we're not sure how this is going to be received.
May I ask a follow-up, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And do you intend that the district will be staffed? Or
Staff,
it, go ahead.
no, not at the present time, but that our job now as the Friends of the Red Cedar Basin is to do the legwork to get the Lake District established. We think it's very, very important. Once the Lake District is established, there's no need for our organization. We'll probably disband. And if some of us end up as board members, fine. But if whatever happens on the lake after that Lake District is established will be determined by the 5-member commission and the landowners around the lake within the Lake District themselves. So we're a little hesitant to march past the point of approval by the county because we haven't got anything to say about what will eventually be done. We could suggest, and we certainly are doing that, but this group of people is going to determine their own fate and the fate of the lake eventually.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, a question.
Yeah, Gary.
There is several county owned land and probably townships and the DNR. And because they're open to the public, would they have to pay any kind of payment to the district? Because there are people from around the county could be using these parks like Champney Park and Northwest Landing and all those stuff. Are those parks exempted from paying in the district, or would they be expected to make some kind of payment?
Yes and no. They are all of the land touching the lake within our boundary is included, whether it's private land or if it's government land. We have 3 townships: Menominee, Sherman, 4, Tainter, and Red Cedar involved. Each of them has property within the boundaries of our Lake District. The state has property, the county has property. We are going to include them because there may be, they would be involved in what goes on. Now, those entities, those properties pay no taxes right now. They are listed on the tax roll of 0 value, so they pay no taxes, and they would not pay into any taxes levied by the Lake District. However, since they are included properly in the Lake District, we must, for the town properties, we must go to the town boards or the town supervisor and get a vote, yes or no, on whether they would like to have their town properties included in the Lake District. The statutes are specific in exempting federal property and state property, so we don't have to worry about the state for signature. Again, there'd only be one signature involved for any one of these entities, because no matter how many properties a landowner owns, they still only get one vote. We're not sure about the county, and that's a question that we had for you today. And I don't know if you can answer that right now, but there are several county properties in here. The state does not exempt the county properties from having a required signature in a petition. I'm of my thought is that the county will making an ultimate decision on whether the Lake District ought to be formed or not. And that decision would constitute a signature. Or we could approach the appropriate county official, whether it's the chairman of the board of supervisors or Tom Quinn, whoever has the authority to sign for something like this. We could do that within the next couple of months, and we don't really know how the county will fit into this.
Mr. Chairman, this is Chase, just to respond to that. So we're trying to, work through our requirements on our end as well, and we'll have some answers for that. I also, on the line with us today is Heather Wood in our department. She has been involved in this process and has provided some valuable input based on her experiences and knowledge of these types of situations. So Heather, I guess if it's okay with you, Chairman Quinn, if Heather has any comments regarding some of the next steps for what the county's role is, I'd invite her to speak up here.
Sure.
Hi. So Supervisor Bjork, to answer your question, so there isn't much in state code for whether or not county-owned property would be subject to what's called mill rate tax, which is typically what lake districts use. That being said, there is explicit wording about special assessments, and if the district decides to impose additional fees for whatever reason at their annual meeting, and county land is typically subject to that, and that is how it's written in Chapter 33 of the statutes. So if the Lake District folks do opt, and the county would be considered a constituent of the Lake District, that land would be subject to special assessment fees.
And the special assessment fees are not tied to the value of the property, is that correct?
Not to the best of my knowledge, but it does still fall under the limit for the maximum mill rate.
Okay. Well, that, and I'm sure that would apply also to the property owned by townships.
Correct.
Okay, thanks, Heather. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Well, Jim Anderson, Pete, good to see you again. It's been a
Good to
long
see you,
time. I want to commend you. This is awesome. The work you're doing and the knowledge, and I am so impressed. I wanted to reach out to you and Mr. Bills for this great explanation and commend you for the work. I will not be on the county board by the time this comes to them because I'm done in April, but anything that I can help, I just wanted to reach out, Pete, and say, nice to see you again, and thank you very much for all you're doing, and best wishes.
Well, we would like to reciprocate. We've had terrific cooperation from the county offices that we've dealt with so far. Chase Cummings and his office have just been awesome, answered virtually every question that we've had. And of course, this map was produced by Steve Kochaver and his crew. We couldn't have asked for, it's a work of art in itself. We couldn't ask for anything better. And the registrar of deeds sat with me for 2 hours going over trusts and who owns and who should sign and this and that. And we're pretty sure that we've got 99.9% of the proper signature people identified for each parcel. And the county couldn't be more cooperative, and we really, really appreciate that. We wish you would stay on the board for another year, Jim. And I think we should vote for you to do that unanimously.
Okay. Any other questions? So that, I think the committee all expresses our appreciation and respect for all the work that you're doing and have yet to take on, which is very impressive. And we look forward to hearing back as your petitions get signed and doing our part in reviewing it and passing it on to the full board. So
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
yeah, thanks. So thank you, Tom and Pete, for coming on today. We really appreciate and look forward to talking in the future. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's go on to, I think we're down to 8B. Resolution authorizing participation in the Snowmobile Recreational Trails Grant Program. Are there any, Chase, do you have any comments on this?
The only comment I would have is that this is an annual resolution that we bring before you every year to authorize us to apply for another grant cycle. As is noted in the resolution and the supporting information there, that county board has I guess approved that this committee can sign for this. So this resolution is not a full county board resolution. It'll stop here with this committee, as has been done in the past. So in light of Tina's presentation earlier and the background of this program, I think again, this is a reoccurring resolution that we must bring to you every year.
Can I have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval of the county's participation in the snowmobile program.
Thank you, Diane. Is there a second?
Supervisor Bjork will second that.
Supervisor Bjork seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We'll say no. Motion carries. Okay, then I think we're down to our last item. Request for use of ARPA funds for groundwater monitoring program.
So I can introduce this and invite those on the line that especially Heather Wood here in our office to help describe this. But as you recall from our previous meeting, we had presented some options and some initial talking or discussion points regarding the use of ARPA funds for a private well monitoring program to monitor groundwater within the county. We came back and put together a few options here again with a little bit more detail, and then also discuss and review those with our partners in public health. I don't see any public health members on the call today, so I take that as reassuring that they're in support of these options, but certainly they would be available with questions if you were to have them later on. Basically, what the action request is today is, or provide these options for discussion of what a private well monitoring program would look like. And then your action would be to decide what you would like to do as far as requesting the use of ARPA funds to the full county board. With your permission, Chairman Quinn, I'd like to turn it over to Heather. She's going to explain some of the details and some of the numbers and acronyms that are on this part of your packet. And then we can have a discussion and hopefully answer any questions you might have. So if you don't mind, Heather, I can let you take it away.
All right. So before we get kind of too deep into the numbers and stuff of this, I just kind of want to start out by having a brief conversation about why we're doing a groundwater monitoring program. Now, of course, the groundwater in Dunn County, in some areas, has a lot of nitrates, and that's, of course, a problem. But from the land conservation perspective, when we do studies, at least in my mind, the county conservation programs are typically meant to be the boots on the ground. We're meant to be doing the implementation to get things to fix these problems. And while things like monitoring are very important to seeing how we're doing and what we're doing, we have to be able to balance that out with also getting boots on the ground to get these solutions rolled out. And that's why in each of these proposals, we have rough estimates for what staff time would look like, with the reminder that when we pull staff time for monitoring, that means we're pulling from implementation and putting it towards monitoring. I don't want to completely devalue the value of monitoring. You know, it gives us a tool to help target where we should be doing and focusing our implementation when that's within our control. It gives us a way to establish long-term trends to see how our work is impacting the landscape, but it's just something that we need to be cognizant of as we go through these proposals. So now that I'm done with my soapbox, the top here is the breakdown of where we got these numbers. And these are, with the exception of the PFAS testing, these are the numbers that we pulled from the UW Stevens Point lab pricing sheets. We would be doing some reaching out and seeing how if they're willing to work with us to get, you know, a little bit more bang for our buck type of thing. But this is kind of the worst case scenario for our numbers. If you could scroll down, Tom. In each of these proposals, you'll see that we have all 22 town halls being tested with a comprehensive homeowners package and a PFAS test. We feel that the town halls testing, it establishes a sort of central point. We know that those aren't going to be changing ownership anytime soon. They're public, and so if we do get money in the future, we can go back and retest to see if there's been any changes. And this falls back to that long-term trend analysis. The PFAS testing has come from a fair few community comments that we've received. Chase and I both received emails. I believe public comment has come in with concerns about PFAS in the area. So again, the town halls seem to be the best place to start because they're central to each town. Option A and option B are fairly different. Option A is kind of a one-time thing. And in that, we're doing the comprehensive homeowners package, which includes the nitrate, the metal scan, and the DAC screen. And DAC screen is testing for triazines, which is a form of herbicide. So that would just be a one-off thing. The main difference between those two is that the second option, option B, is doing, instead of a comprehensive homeowners package for the people, it's doing a general. I think I'm getting those two mixed up. Option A would be doing a general homeowners, and option B would be doing a comprehensive homeowners. The difference between those two is the comprehensive homeowners includes the metals and the DAC screen, whereas the general does not. The reason we didn't include that in the first one is because the first option A has source testing, which is testing for pharmaceuticals, personal care products, and agricultural chemicals. And so that would be, the DAC screen would be built into that option instead. Because we're not doing the full secondary testing with option B, we opted to go with the comprehensive homeowners to include the DAC screen, so that way we at least have that tidbit of information. The two options, option A and B, option A has a lower upfront cost with the total rounding of $75,000, but it's important to remember that the staff cost would be significantly higher because we would have to go back and do a second round of testing. Option C is kind of the big boy, if you will, and that is essentially a very upscaled version of option B. A couple of notes. We've kind of gone back and forth on doing the bacteria testing. With bacteria samples, it takes a lot more time, and that's not something that we would really be comfortable having volunteers do. Like Chase mentioned in the last meeting, there's a lot of room for error in that. So I don't think it would fall well within the scope of what we are intending with this program. The targeted samples, I have a few different variables that I'd like to target for. I'd like to look at geographic data gaps, temporal data gaps, and then see where we're at with what we have for folks willing to participate in those areas that we have those gaps. And then from there, go with something kind of prorated. So that way we have a very wide range view of the groundwater within Dunn County as a whole. Ideally, we want to target wells that have a unique well ID, because this gives us a full report of how deep the well is, where the water level is, and a variety of things. So that way, if we do have, when we do have high nitrate levels, we can kind of maybe offer some level of explanation. The target completion date is December 31st, and that's dependent on when the ARPA funds need to be spent by. We can move this if the funds can go later, but that's where that falls into. And then, of course, outline of where our staff time is.
I would just mention too, and Heather can explain this further, but you'll notice in there that we mentioned the word targeted sampling, and just to make sure that there's no confusion with what we're trying to do here. We're not targeting individuals or people. This is all voluntary. So the targeted areas are just as what Heather mentioned, those areas of the county that we may be lacking data, maybe have old data, some of the other things that she mentioned. Once we do our outreach, it's still going to be on a voluntary basis that a landowner would participate. Heather also mentioned about the pricing and potential price breaks depending on quantity of samples that we can work out through the lab. Whether those samples are directed through Stevens Point's lab or another public lab such as Eau Claire, we'll work through a lot of those details. So I guess the general concept would be to the level of funds that you're comfortable with requesting will dictate the level of program that we can roll out. So as Heather mentioned, the complexity of the program, it can vary and will vary on the impacts it has on staff time. So keeping that in mind, these three options are what we've put together, and you should know that if it's approved and we begin to implement this, some of these things may change just on the fluidity of this project. We may or may not be able to get all the targeted number of samples. We may be struggling to get volunteers to provide samples. We may need to solicit assistance from volunteers, either citizens or students to help out. A lot of those details we'll need to work out. But I think at this point, we're at a decision of what you would like to see for a general program, and then those details can be worked out later. So with that, Heather and I are here to try to answer any questions and provide some guidance for your decision.
Thank you, Chase and Heather. Are there any questions from the committee?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, Diane.
Since the ARPA dollars are this kind of unprecedented opportunity for us to do something that we have been talking about for, I don't know, I think I've been on this committee for 6 years. And so we've talked about it a lot. My tendency, my sort of personal preference is let's go with the big boy, as Heather put it. But what I really want to know from the staff, given the number of hours associated with these, if the staff has a preference as to option A, B, or C, what feels reasonable for you to take on, that will that's going to inform my observation about how much money to ask for and what, the scope of what we want to do here.
Heather deserves to chime in here, certainly, because the bulk of this is going to be her time. When you look at option C and the 1,000 hours, I mean, that's half of a person. So that's really half of Heather's time. And I don't know that we're comfortable committing half of Heather's time to this. So with that said, then we would need to look at outside ways for collecting samples, and then evaluate staff time for either myself, but specifically Heather and maybe our public health partners for training, assistance in setting up the volunteers to help collect these samples. We've also talked about, creating a collection day. So go to townships and sit there for the day and have citizens just bring their water samples in. That's done in other parts of the state in our region. When it really comes down to staff time, I think our best value is for us to have a reasonable number of samples and to collect the data or collect the sampling ourselves. I guess that's my preference, but I'm going to let Heather here express her concerns and or desires, I guess, as well.
So I tend to be a rather ambitious person, and while I do like the idea of option C, I also recognize that that is about half my time, as Chase mentioned. If we had some level of confidence that we could solicit help from, volunteers, or if public health did have time to put towards this, and I can't speak to whether or not they do, because I have no clue what kind of capacity they have. I know Jeff and Amy are still settling into their respective roles, and I imagine it would likely fall to them if we were to work with public health on this sort of a thing. So on one hand, I can see the value of going with option C. I can see the value of going with such a large program because, as you mentioned, this is an unprecedented time where we have these funds available when we typically wouldn't. On the flip side, I also don't think I can put half of my time in any given year towards one singular project that is aimed entirely at monitoring. And that's why I would tend to lean towards option A or B, or maybe even some sort of hybrid of the two. We were all at the conference, the Wisconsin Land and Water Conference last week, and this is something that's fairly commonly spoke about within our field. And a lot of counties are starting to do this, and some counties are having difficulty getting volunteers. So that's another thing that makes me a little bit hesitant with option C. 1,000 samples is ambitious. And getting that many people to volunteer for this might be more of a task, a bigger task than we think it will be. I think as far as value in terms of getting data, getting an idea of what the groundwater within our county looks like, the best option to go with would be A or B because they are smaller. We put option C in there because in the last meeting there were some comments about maybe, why not go for $300,000? Now that would be an entire staff position. But this is, option C is kind of the biggest we feel that we could reasonably do. And even that it would be fairly ambitious.
Thank you for being so direct, both of you. I appreciate it.
I would also add this, Supervisor Morehouse and the committee. I mean, because this is an unprecedented opportunity and one that's not going to come around. I mean, we're gonna do what we can to implement. If you were to pick the option C, we'll figure it out. I think the big thing here is just timing. So when do we have to have ARPA funds expensed? If we're allowed to, right now we're intending to try to get something done by the end of next year. So we'll have basically 2 years. I think ARPA's requirements may extend into 2024 or maybe the year after. So, there's a potential for us to spread our workload out over several years. So I don't want to completely discourage not aiming for the moon on this. But there is, as Heather and I both mentioned, there are some challenges, and we face those challenges every day, as was alluded to in Tina's presentation, with just trying to balance workload and meet all the necessary priorities. So we'll just have to evaluate that and react as to what we end up with. So,
and I guess to kind of expand a little bit on what Chase said there, I don't think option C is some terrible choice. It would open up the opportunity for, depending on when the ARPA funds do lapse, we could maybe do like seasonal testing or repeat testing to see what kind of, winter, summer fluctuation there is in nitrate levels in areas that test high. I mean, there are ways to make it work. But it's just very ambitious, and we would have to get a little bit more creative in how to make it work.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Dave.
The ARPA funds have to be designated by the end of 24, and we would have until 26, the end of 26, to use them. So you could spread that work out over a few years. My other comment, you talked about finding volunteers. If you went with option C and looking at the targeted samples, that would be about 34 per township. And if you ask the town boards to try to help you find 34 volunteers for that group, I think, I guess speaking for my own town board, I would be happy to make phone calls and find 34 volunteers to get a sample from. And then the other 250 voluntary ones, I would assume that you could target areas where you think you need more samples. That's just a comment of mine, I guess, a thought. Thank you.
For clarity's sake, the 250, the ones that we have labeled as voluntary, maybe I should probably pick a different word for that. Those are intended for like first come, first serve. If somebody calls my office and says, hey, I want to get my well tested, I can say, sure, what time works for you? And just go down without any regard to where they are within the county. And the reason we had the targeted is to kind of prevent from all our samples getting clustered into one or two areas within the county, because we want a broad view. But we wanted to allow some freedom within that, which is why we built in the voluntary first come, first serve testing.
So the total samples, like say on option C, the total samples are 750?
1,000.
They are 1,000. Okay, thank you.
And I would offer too, or thanks, Chairman Bartlett, for the clarification on the timeline for ARPA funds. I think that does help. It would help this process to spread this out. I also think, or also like everyone to know that, Heather and I spent a significant amount of time discussing this, and the townships are going to be one of our primary outreach efforts to gather sampling. That's why we've picked 22 town halls. And so I think your idea for reaching out to town boards and soliciting volunteers and areas to get well sampling is appreciated, and certainly part of our educational and outreach campaign that we would utilize for this implementation. So we appreciate your willingness to offer that.
Okay, any other comments or
Mr.
questions?
Chairman,
Yes, Gary.
just a couple of comments. I know there's not a lot of dairy farmers left in Dunn County, but I know as a dairy farmer, the state, well, not the state, but the fuel men from the creamery comes around once a year to check my water for bacteria. So we have kind of a scattering of tests for bacteria. And my other comment was when I was on the solid waste board, we had several summer interns, and they really done a lot. They were probably going towards their major in that subject. And I would like to see any of the options included money for a possible summer intern.
Thank you, Supervisor Bjork. So to your second point regarding the internship, so we are in the process of working with the Alliance of Dunn County's sportsmen's clubs and conservation clubs who have sponsored a conservation intern over the years. We're working through that now, and we'll likely have an intern on staff here for this coming summer, and we intend to work with our partners to have that in the future. Having more than one intern is certainly an option, and if we have one dedicated to assisting in this type of activity, certainly would help out into the collection and administration of this program. To your first point regarding milk testing and on farms with bacteria, you're yeah, obviously you're correct. That takes place. The unfortunate part for that is it's not always public information. So that's part of a discussion we had last time regarding the lab in Colfax, of that being a private lab. Was certainly an option. We encourage landowners and citizens to get their well tested, water tested, and submit it through Colfax. However, they're not obligated to make their data available to entities like ours or across the state. So the benefit of having a program like this is going to help ensure that we can utilize this information in a public setting as best as we can. But to your point, for bacteria, we are going to encourage landowners should be, private well owners should be testing for bacteria on their well annually. That is a state recommendation. And those individuals that are doing it through their business and milking cows, that's good information to have for them to know. So it is reassuring that landowners are aware of what the condition of their water is to some degree, specifically bacteria. So I think we feel a little more comfortable not including that as part of this program too.
Okay. I have a question for Supervisor Bartlett. I'm wondering, Dave, if you have a sense that something in that $175,000 range would be something you could support as county board chair. Any thoughts about that?
I guess I'm fairly conservative, and I'm really pay attention to what our levy is going to do with the borrowing that we have done in the past and what we have committed so far. But yes, I believe I would support the $175,000. I have looked at the numbers, and I believe that if we were to use ARPA funds instead of borrowing this next year for a capital improvement, that we would still have a little over $1 million in ARPA funds available, and we could put ARPA funds towards this $175,000 and still have $1 million of ARPA funds left over that we could put towards less borrowing in 24 or anything else that the majority decided to use. So I would support it. I agree with Diane that we've been talking about water quality issues forever, a long time, and we need to get a baseline. I wished we were also going to look at quantity, but I think this is a good starting point.
Thank you, Dave. I have, with regard to the quantity question, I may have misheard, but I thought, did I hear Heather say something about the test being able to determine well depth? Is that, did I mishear that?
No, one of the things that we're in the targeted samples, ideally, and this won't be possible in every area, but there is, ever since 1988, Chase, is that correct? Any well that's been drilled has to have a well drilling report, which includes the depth to the static water level as well as the total depth of the well. I would like to have most of our targeted samples go towards samples that do have those well reports on file. Frequently in areas like this, the static water level is the top of the water table, and there's typically lower nitrate concentrations the further under the top of the water table people have their wells. In some cases, wells have to be drilled above the water table and pulled up through. In some cases, they're 50 feet underneath where the top of the water table is. If we have that information available to us, when property owners come to us and say, well, why is my water, why do I have 20 parts per million nitrates? We can take a look at their well report and maybe give some educated answer or guess. There's no way we can say with absolute certainty, this is why your well is like this, but the well reports give us some ability to have an educated guess of why. In the grand scheme of things, it also kind of gives us an idea of where the walls are setting and where, if we see any sort of a pattern, the folks that have their wells 30 feet above the static water level tend to test higher, while the people who have it 50 feet below tend to test lower, that sort of thing.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Chairman Quinn, if I could just add a little bit more to the quantity. Chairman Bartlett, we appreciate your comments on the quantity now and previously too. So we are, as Steve had presented from our department on some of the Well Intel program, and Heather is now operating that going forward. The Well Intel is looking at quantity, and it's a continuous monitoring system where we have those 8 wells in the county. Heather and I have talked specifically about location of those wells and if any can be moved to provide a better coverage of the county. The one thing with those monitoring units is that they are expensive and also long-term. There's an annual cost to them. So given the limited time frame on these types of funds, we could get 3-4 years of data, but then we'd have that extra cost to continue them in the future. Now, there are other ways to look at quantity and measure quantity. My experience in Pepin County was not with technology of continuous monitoring systems, but more of a drop a steel tape down the well, check the water depth, and do that on a reoccurring basis. That is used to be a preferred practice when monitoring quantity, but now we run into concerns with introducing bacteria to the well when we do that. So the safe way to monitor quantity would be to have these continuous monitoring systems. So not to discredit the potential options. So if there's some flexibility in the use of these funds, we could purchase more monitoring units for that Well Intel program. It's just that when this money runs out, we will then have units that we will either need to find funds to maintain, or we will have to discontinue them, which doesn't really help in the long-term trend analysis.
Okay, any other questions? Here's my thought about this. Well, we're going to be asking for a motion to request that, as I understand it, request that the town board allocate a certain amount of money towards a baseline groundwater monitoring program. And the exact details of that program don't need to be spelled out in the resolution. So any of these elements that we're looking at could be modified in the future as a program comes together, as we get costs, as the potential for having interns comes into play. I think I'm right about that. If I'm not, then Dave, tell me. But I think what we're doing today is identifying kind of generally which of these programs we think we would like to pursue, and then placing a number on it, asking the county board to approve the expenditure of that amount, or up to that amount.
I would
Mr.
agree
Chairman?
with that, Tom.
Okay, all right. Any
Mr. Chairman,
questions?
just a clarification, you said town board, but that's not what
He
you
meant
meant.
county.
Okay,
Oh, just to clarify, thank you.
I'm sorry. Okay. Given that, would anyone care to make a motion with regard to which dollar amount? I guess generally that leads to the general program amount that we'd be looking at.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Dan.
I will move that the Planning Resources and Development Committee ask the county board to allocate $175,000 in ARPA funds towards a well testing program.
Thank you. Is there a second for that?
I will second it, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Kinnear seconds. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Anderson.
thank you. Yeah, I have no objection to this. I was leaning toward B only because of staff hours and hearing the presentation to begin with of option A, B, or C, and making up my mind before hearing all this, I thought, well, B, and we did have the option to always change it. So don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to C, but I certainly was leaning toward B at first because of less staff hours. That would have been my preference.
Thank you. And my thought is that with the understanding we received from Chairman Bartlett that the designation of ARPA funds extends through 24 and the actual expenditure extends even further than that through possibly 26, that would give staff flexibility with regard to allocating hours. And also the idea that that some of the funds, if the budget is jiggered with, could be used potentially for hired interns that may alleviate some of the staffing concerns. Is that accurate statement for the staff? You feel more comfortable with a larger program given the longer potential time frame?
I think we would agree with that, Heather. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. The 2 extra years is a lot more time than I thought we had to work with, and the
Okay.
potential for having some form of intern assistance definitely would alleviate a lot of my own personal worries about this particular size of a program.
Okay. Any further questions? So we have motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thanks, everybody. A long time coming, but a good start. Yeah. And thanks, thanks also, if anybody's listening, to the members of the public that have been asking for this kind of program and providing their support to it. And I know that going forward, we're going to rely on that support to implement this. So a good start. With that, I think we've come to the end of our agenda. Are there any announcements that anyone has? Okay, then our next meeting is March 22nd.